There comes a moment in every person's life when they have to decide, am I the victim or am I the driver? Most people spend years blaming circumstances, parents, bosses, governments, and luck. But the truth is, until you take ownership of everything, your choices, your habits, your results, you will never unlock your real power. Responsibility is not about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about control. When you say, I am responsible, what you're really saying is, I am in charge. That mindset shift changes everything. Because if you created your current results, you also have the power to create new ones. The reason so many people stay stuck is because blaming is easy. Excuses feel comfortable. But comfort is the enemy of growth. The second you drop the excuses and accept responsibility, you step into the driver's seat of your life. You stop waiting for opportunity, and you start creating it. Think about it. Every successful leader, entrepreneur, or athlete has one thing in common. They own their outcomes. If they fail, they don't point fingers. They adjust. If they succeed, they don't say it's luck. They say it's preparation meeting opportunity. Responsibility is their secret weapon. And here's the twist. Responsibility doesn't make life heavier, it makes it lighter, because the burden of blame is heavier than the burden of discipline. When you blame, you carry resentment, frustration, and helplessness. When you take responsibility, you carry clarity, direction, and control. Which weight would you rather carry? Responsibility is freedom. Freedom from excuses. Freedom from waiting. Freedom from being powerless. Once you decide that every part of your life is your responsibility, your health, your finances, your relationships, your growth, you unlock the ability to shape your destiny. It's simple. Responsibility is the starting line of transformation. If you want to change your life, change your mindset from, it's not my fault, to it's my responsibility. Because as soon as you own it, you can improve it. And improvement is the path to success. So here's the challenge. Stop pointing outward. Start looking inward. Ask yourself, what am I responsible for today? What can I do differently right now to move forward? Because the life you want won't come from excuses. It will come from responsibility. Unlock it, and you unlock everything. Stop blaming, stop waiting, stop hoping, because nobody's coming to save you. The day you decide to take full responsibility for your life is the day everything changes. Excuses kill dreams, but responsibility builds empires. Your results are not luck, not chance, not someone else's fault. They are yours. And the greatest power you'll ever unlock is not money, not status, not talent. It's responsibility. Now, let's slow that down. Responsibility is often seen as a burden. People hear the word and think of weight, of duty, of something heavy. But in reality, responsibility is freedom. The moment you say, I am responsible, you're really saying, I am in charge. And that, my friend, is the ultimate power. Because when you blame others, you hand them your power. But when you take responsibility, you take the power back. Most people never understand this. They're too busy pointing fingers at their parents, their bosses, the government, the economy, even fate. But here's the problem with blame. If it's someone else's fault, then it's someone else's job to fix it. And if it's someone else's job to fix it, you've just made yourself powerless. That's a bad trade. Never give away your power in exchange for an excuse. Responsibility says, if I created it, I can change it. If I caused it, I can improve it. Even if I didn't cause it, I can choose my response to it. That shift in thinking is where transformation begins. Because you can't change the past, but you can own the future. Think about the great leaders, entrepreneurs, athletes, and thinkers. They all share this one trait. They own their outcomes. If they fail, they don't hide behind excuses. They say, that's on me. I'll fix it. I'll do better. If they succeed, they don't chalk it up to luck. They say, preparation met opportunity, and I was ready. That kind of mindset is rare, but it's powerful. It makes you unstoppable. And here's the beautiful paradox. Responsibility doesn't make life heavier. It makes life lighter. Because the burden of excuses is heavier than the burden of discipline. Excuses weigh you down with frustration, resentment, and helplessness. But responsibility lifts you up with clarity, focus, and direction. One may feel easier in the moment, but it costs you in the long run. The other feels harder in the moment, but it rewards you for a lifetime. So why do so many avoid it? Because excuses are comfortable. Victimhood is seductive. It lets you off the hook, but it also keeps you stuck. Responsibility is harder up front. It forces you to look in the mirror, to admit where you fell short, to acknowledge where you could do better. But that mirror, as painful as it may be, is where growth begins. You want freedom? Start with responsibility. Freedom from debt begins with financial responsibility. Freedom from sickness begins with health responsibility. Freedom from loneliness begins with relationship responsibility. Freedom from mediocrity begins with personal responsibility. Whatever area you want freedom in, responsibility is the doorway. And here's a secret. Most people don't realize responsibility is contagious. When you take responsibility for your own life, you inspire others to do the same. You become an example. People see your ownership, your discipline, your results, and they say, if they can do it, maybe I can too. Responsibility not only changes your life, it changes the lives of those around you. Now imagine this, 10 years from now, you're sitting with yourself. There are two possible versions of you. One is proud, grateful you took responsibility when you did. The other is bitter, wishing you had stopped blaming and started owning sooner. Which version do you want to meet? That choice is being made today in how much responsibility you're willing to accept. So the next time you're tempted to blame, stop yourself. The next time you're tempted to say, it's not my fault, replace it with, it's my responsibility. Because the truth is, what you don't own, you can't improve. And what you don't improve, you'll eventually regret. Responsibility is not punishment. It's power. It's not the weight that holds you down. It's the lever that lifts you up. Unlock it, and you unlock everything. A lot of people misunderstand responsibility. They think it means guilt. They think it means carrying shame, pointing at themselves and saying, it's all my fault. That's not responsibility. That's self-punishment. Responsibility is not about guilt at all. Responsibility is about control. It's about saying, I'm in charge of what happens next. See, guilt looks backward, but responsibility looks forward. Guilt says, I messed up, and now I'm stuck with the consequences. Responsibility says, I may have messed up, but I have the power to fix it. One paralyzes you. The other mobilizes you. One keeps you in the past. The other opens the door to the future. And here's where people go wrong. They confuse blame with ownership. Blame is a weapon pointed outward or inward. If you blame others, you hand away your power. If you blame yourself, you beat yourself up without progress. But ownership is different. Ownership says, this is my life. These are my results. If I don't like them, I'll change them. Blame is about fault. Ownership is about power. Think about it like this. Blame is reactive. Ownership is proactive. Blame says, because of them, I can't. Ownership says, in spite of them, I will. Which one do you think produces better results? Which one gives you momentum instead of misery? When you choose ownership over blame, you stop waiting for someone else to fix things. You stop waiting for apologies, for circumstances to improve, for the world to get easier. Instead, you say, I'll start where I am with what I've got, and I'll move forward. That's the kind of attitude that separates leaders from followers, builders from complainers, winners from whiners. Now, responsibility doesn't mean you control everything. That's another misconception. Life will hand you challenges outside your control. Accidents, setbacks, unfairness, even tragedies. But responsibility means you own your response. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control what happens in you. And the quality of your response will determine the quality of your life. You can meet a setback with blame. Why me? Why now? Who did this to me? Or you can meet it with ownership. All right, this is tough, but here's what I'm going to do about it. One mindset drains you, the other strengthens you. One closes doors, the other opens them. It's the same in small things as in big things. Miss a deadline. Blame says, the team slowed me down. The tools weren't right. Ownership says, I should have planned better. Skip a workout? Blame says, I was too busy. The weather was bad. Ownership says, I didn't prioritize it. Ownership puts you in control. and control puts you in position to change. The truth is, people who live in blame never grow. They're always waiting for someone else to make life easier. But people who live in ownership grow constantly. Why? Because they're always looking for ways they can improve regardless of what others do. And growth compounds. Ownership compounds. So let's be clear. Responsibility is not about assigning fault. It's about claiming power. It's not about carrying shame. It's about carrying strength. It's not about being the victim of yesterday. It's about being the architect of tomorrow. That's the real meaning of responsibility. The moment you shift from blame to ownership, you unlock your ability to change anything. You stop asking, who's at fault? And start asking, what can I do? That one question can change your finances, your health, your relationships, your entire future. Because life is not about who's to blame. Life is about who will take responsibility. And the ones who do are the ones who win. Now let's talk about why so many people avoid responsibility. If responsibility is the doorway to freedom, why don't more people walk through it? The answer is simple. Excuses are comfortable. Excuses are easy. They cost nothing in the moment, but they cost everything in the long run. See, responsibility asks for discipline. It asks for effort. It asks for honesty. Excuses, on the other hand, let you off the hook. You can tell yourself a story, and suddenly you don't feel guilty for not taking action. You didn't fail. It was the weather, the boss, the system, the timing. Excuses are the soft pillow people rest their failures on. But here's the problem. Comfort is a liar. Excuses might feel good in the short term, but they steal your power in the long term. Every time you make an excuse, you hand away control. You say, it wasn't me, and in doing so, you admit, it can't be me who fixes it. And that's dangerous, because once you give up responsibility, you give up improvement. Now, let's talk about victim mentality. This is the ultimate trap. Victim mentality is when you not only make excuses, but you build your identity around them. You start to see yourself not just as someone who had a setback, but as someone who is permanently powerless. And once you label yourself a victim, you stop looking for solutions. Victims don't seek growth. Victims seek sympathy. The victim mindset is seductive because it earns attention. People gather around victims, they offer comfort. They nod and agree, and that can feel good. Having others acknowledge your pain, your struggle, your unfair circumstances. But here's the danger. Sympathy doesn't change your situation. It just locks you into it. You don't grow in sympathy. You grow in responsibility. I've seen it happen too many times. Someone faces a challenge, a failed business, a broken relationship, a bad hand dealt by life. Instead of saying, this is tough, but I'll learn, I'll adjust, I'll rebuild, they say, this always happens to me. I can't win. The system is against me. People are against me. And once they say that enough times, they start to believe it. That belief shapes their future. Because what you believe, you act on. And what you act on, you become. The victim mentality convinces people that responsibility is too heavy, too unfair. But in reality, the weight of victimhood is heavier than the weight of responsibility. Victimhood chains you to helplessness. Responsibility frees you to act. Victimhood shrinks your world. Responsibility expands it. The real tragedy is that victim mentality robs people of their potential. Imagine carrying all the gifts, all the talents, all the opportunities inside you, but never using them because you told yourself it wasn't your fault, so it couldn't be your fight. That's the price of excuses. That's the cost of playing the victim. Now, does this mean life is always fair? Of course not. There are real obstacles, real injustices, real setbacks that are not your fault. But here's the truth. Even if it's not your fault, it's still your responsibility. Because waiting for the world to be fair is a losing strategy. The world may never be fair, but you can always choose how you respond. And in that choice lies your power. So why do people avoid responsibility? Because responsibility demands action, and action feels harder than excuses. But the irony is, excuses make life harder in the long run, while responsibility makes life easier. Excuses feel light now and heavy later. Responsibility feels heavy now and light later. One leads to regret, the other leads to growth. The choice is always there. Stay comfortable in excuses, or step into the power of responsibility. Stay trapped in the victim mindset, or rise into the mindset of ownership. One path looks easy today, but costs you tomorrow. The other looks hard today, but pays you for a lifetime. So whenever you catch yourself reaching for an excuse, stop and remind yourself. Comfort is a liar, and victimhood is a trap. The only way out is responsibility. The only way up is ownership, because the moment you take responsibility, you take your life back. The moment you accept responsibility, the way you see the world begins to change. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses. Before, everything looked blurry. Reasons, excuses, problems everywhere. After, everything looks clear, possibilities, options, solutions. Responsibility flips the script. Instead of asking, why me, you start asking, what now? Instead of focusing on what's outside your control, you start focusing on what's inside your control. That shift alone can turn a struggling life into a successful one. When you carry responsibility, you stop seeing obstacles as stop signs and start seeing them as stepping stones. A failed business is no longer the end of the road. It's a lesson in strategy. A bad relationship is no longer just heartbreak. It's feedback on how to choose and how to grow. A tough season in life stops being a curse and starts being a classroom. That's the power of responsibility. It doesn't remove the challenges, but it changes how you interpret them. And when your interpretation changes, your actions change and your results follow. Let me give you some real examples. Think about the athletes we admire. The great ones don't blame the referee, the weather, or the crowd. When they lose, they take ownership. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team. He didn't sulk, he went back to work. He didn't say, the coach was unfair. He said, I'll prove myself, that's responsibility. Kobe Bryant was notorious for saying, I'll take the blame. Win or lose, he owned the outcome. And that ownership gave him the power to adjust, improve, and rise. Look at entrepreneurs. They live in a world where excuses are abundant. Competition, economy, regulations, timing. But the successful ones don't waste energy blaming. They take responsibility for finding a way. Steve Jobs didn't say, people don't get it. He said, it's my responsibility to show them. Elon Musk didn't say, building rockets is too hard. He said, we'll figure it out. These people weren't born with a secret key. Their key was responsibility. They owned the vision, they owned the setbacks. They owned the outcome, and because they owned it, they had the power to create it. Even in leadership, the same principle applies. The best leaders never point fingers when things go wrong. They step up and say, the responsibility is mine. That's why people trust them. Think about military leaders. When missions fail, the great ones don't blame their teams. They say, I failed to prepare them. That kind of ownership commands respect. It inspires others to rise to the same level. Responsibility multiplies leadership because people follow strength, not excuses. Now, here's the interesting thing. Responsibility doesn't just shift how you see problems. It also shifts how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as someone limited by circumstances, and you start seeing yourself as someone capable of influencing circumstances. That's a big difference. One identity is powerless, the other is powerful. An identity shapes destiny. If you see yourself as powerless, you act small. If you see yourself as powerful, you act bold. Responsibility is the switch that flips that identity. You can see it even in everyday life. The student who blames the teacher never grows. The student who says, it's my job to learn, finds a way. The employee who blames the boss stays stuck. The one who says, it's my responsibility to build skills, creates opportunities. The person who blames their health on genetics gives up. The one who takes responsibility for diet, exercise, and habits transforms their life. Responsibility is the dividing line between progress and stagnation. And here's the beauty. The more responsibility you take, the more control you feel. It doesn't shrink your world. It expands it. You begin to realize that you don't have to wait on perfect conditions. You don't have to wait on anyone's approval. You don't have to wait at all. You can start today. You can start right now. That's perspective. Responsibility teaches you that life doesn't happen to you, it happens because of you. So if you want to change your perspective, stop looking outward for someone to blame and start looking inward for what you can change. That shift will not only open your eyes, it will open your future. Let's bring responsibility down to the areas that matter most. Because it's not just a philosophy, it's practical. It shows up in your health, your money, your relationships, and your growth. These are the 4 pillars of life, and responsibility is the foundation beneath all of them. Start with health. Too many people hand their health away to chance, to genetics, to doctors. They eat without thinking. They live without discipline. And then when problems come, they blame bad luck. But the truth is, your body is your responsibility. Nobody else eats for you. Nobody else exercises for you. Nobody else builds your habits. Responsibility here doesn't mean you'll never face sickness, but it does mean you give yourself the best chance at strength, energy, and longevity. Imagine how much freer life feels when you're not trapped by avoidable problems, when you have the stamina to pursue your goals. That freedom comes from ownership. Now money. People love to blame the economy, their boss, the system. And yes, the system has flaws, but responsibility says, I'll learn how money works. I'll control what I can control. My spending, my saving, my investing, my earning. Money responds to responsibility. The people who take ownership of their financial education, who discipline their habits, are the ones who create freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to give, freedom to build. Blame leaves you broke. Responsibility makes you wealthy. Then there are relationships. This is where responsibility is often the hardest. It's easy to blame others for conflict, for pain, for broken trust. But responsibility says, what is my part? What can I do better? Taking responsibility doesn't mean tolerating abuse or carrying someone else's burden. It means being accountable for how you show up. Are you listening? Are you growing? Are you contributing? Relationships flourish when both sides take responsibility. They wither when both sides shift blame. Freedom in relationships doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means creating the kind of trust, love, and respect that allows growth instead of chains. And finally, growth. This is the area most people neglect. They want progress, they want success, but they won't take responsibility for their own development. They say, nobody taught me. I didn't get the chance. Life is unfair. But responsibility says, I'll teach myself. I'll find the chance. I'll use what I have. Growth is never handed to you. It's chosen, it's pursued, it's earned. Ownership of growth is what turns ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. The freedom here is mental, freedom from limitation, from ignorance, from small thinking. Now let's connect it. In every one of these areas, health, money, relationships, growth, ownership creates freedom. That might sound like a contradiction, but it's not. Responsibility is discipline. Discipline is control, and control is freedom. When you take responsibility for your health, you gain the freedom of energy. When you take responsibility for your money, you gain the freedom of choice. When you take responsibility for your relationships, you gain the freedom of trust and love. When you take responsibility for your growth, you gain the freedom of possibilities. Here's the irony. People avoid responsibility because they think it limits them. They think, if I take responsibility, I'll have less fun, less comfort, less freedom. But the opposite is true. The people with no responsibility have the least freedom. The one who eats whatever they want loses freedom to disease. The one who spends recklessly loses freedom to debt. The one who blames in relationships loses freedom to loneliness. The one who refuses to grow loses freedom to mediocrity. Responsibility may feel heavy at first, but it always leads to lightness. Ownership doesn't chain you. It unchains you. It takes the random chaos of life and gives you direction. It takes the uncertainty of tomorrow and gives you influence. It takes the fear of failure and turns it into the courage to improve. That's the paradox. The more responsibility you accept, the more free you become. So here's the question. Where are you still waiting? Still blaming? Still excusing? Health? Money? Relationships? Growth? Wherever it is, that's the place you've handed away your power. And the moment you take it back, the moment you say, this is my responsibility, is the moment you unlock your freedom. It's one thing to understand responsibility as an idea, and it's another thing to practice it every day. Philosophy is powerful, but unless it shows up in your habits, it doesn't change much. Responsibility isn't just something you talk about, it's something you live. And the good news is, you don't need giant changes overnight. Small, consistent steps build the habit of ownership. Start with journaling. A journal is a mirror for the mind. When you write down your thoughts, your choices, your results, you see yourself more clearly. At the end of the day, ask what went well today that I'm proud to own. What didn't go well that I need to take responsibility for? Where did I let excuses sneak in? This kind of reflection builds awareness. And awareness is the first step toward change. The simple act of writing, I skipped the gym because I chose Netflix, is different from saying I didn't have time. The first is ownership. The second is excuse. Over time, that clarity strengthens your discipline. Next, accountability. Responsibility grows stronger when it's shared. Not blame, not guilt, but shared ownership. Find someone you trust, a mentor, a friend, a peer, and agree to hold each other accountable. Report your goals, your progress, your actions. When someone else knows what you committed to, it becomes harder to slip into excuses. Accountability is like a guardrail. It keeps you from drifting too far off the road. The best performers in every field have coaches, mentors, teams who keep them sharp. Why? Because even the strongest slip when no one is watching. Accountability keeps responsibility alive when motivation fades. Then there's decision ownership. This one is crucial. Every day you make dozens of choices. Some small, some big. The habit of responsibility is built one choice at a time. Instead of saying I had no choice, admit, I made this choice. If you eat the dessert, say, I chose it. If you spend the money, say, I chose it. If you skip the opportunity, say, I chose it. The language you use matters. Blame says, I had no choice. Ownership says, I decided. And the more you practice owning your decisions, the more careful you become in making them. Because once you own them, you can't hide behind excuses anymore. Think about how powerful this is in daily life. Imagine someone at work misses a deadline. The usual response is, blame, point to someone else. Blame the system, make excuses. But responsibility would say, here's what I didn't manage well, and here's how I'll fix it. That one difference builds trust. It builds confidence. People start to see you as reliable, as strong, as a leader. That's not just philosophy, that's practical advantage. Or take health. Instead of saying, I didn't work out because I was busy, write in your journal, I chose to spend my time elsewhere. Suddenly the choice is clear. And tomorrow you can decide differently. Instead of saying, I can't save money because the bills are too high. Right? I chose not to budget. It stings, but it's true. And truth is the starting point of freedom. Daily responsibility is like a muscle. At first it feels heavy. Journaling feels like work. Accountability feels uncomfortable. Decision ownership feels harsh. But with practice, it gets stronger. Soon you don't have to think about it. It becomes who you are. You naturally own your day, your choices, your results. And when that happens, your life begins to change. Here's the beautiful part. These small daily steps compound. A week of journaling brings awareness. A month of accountability builds consistency. A year of decision ownership transforms identity. And identity is destiny. You become the kind of person who doesn't hide, doesn't blame, doesn't excuse. You become the kind of person who can be trusted with health, with money, with relationships, with leadership. So start simple. A notebook, a partner, a habit of saying, I chose, that's all it takes to turn responsibility from an idea into a lifestyle. And when responsibility becomes your lifestyle, freedom becomes your reality. What you don't own, you can't improve. If you don't own your health, you can't improve your body. If you don't own your money, you can't improve your finances. If you don't own your relationships, you can't improve your connections. If you don't own your growth, you can't improve your future. Ownership is the doorway, and improvement is what waits on the other side. But you never get through the doorway until you step up and say, this is mine. It's tempting to think life will change on its own, that someday circumstances will align, luck will arrive, and things will just get better. But life doesn't work that way. Life doesn't reward excuses. Life doesn't reward blame. Life rewards ownership. Because ownership leads to action, and action leads to change. Think about it. Every improvement you've ever made started with a moment of responsibility. The day you said, I need to eat better. The day you said, I have to fix my finances. The day you said, this relationship matters, and I need to work on it. That's ownership. It may have been uncomfortable, but it was the beginning of progress. No ownership. No improvement. The truth is, responsibility isn't just about getting better results. It's about becoming a better person. When you take responsibility, you build character, you build discipline, you build strength. You become someone who can be trusted, not just by others, but by yourself. And that trust is priceless. Because when you trust yourself, you stop doubting, you stop hesitating, and you start living with confidence. But here's the danger. Every day you put off responsibility, you dig the hole deeper. Excuses pile up. Victimhood gets stronger. Regret grows heavier. And regret is the costliest weight you can carry. Responsibility may feel heavy now, but regret will crush you later. So don't wait for the perfect time. Because the perfect time is today. Start small if you have to. Own one thing. Own the way you spend the next hour. Own the next meal you eat. Own the next dollar you save. Own the next conversation you have. Don't worry about changing your whole life in one leap. Just take one step. Ownership is built moment by moment, and each moment strengthens the next. And don't confuse responsibility with perfection. You don't have to get it all right. You just have to own it. Even failure, even mistakes, when you own them, they become fuel for growth. When you blame them, they become anchors that hold you down. The choice is yours. Anchor or fuel, blame or ownership. Regret or growth. So here's the call to action. Start owning today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. Write it down. Say it out loud. Decide it in your heart. From this moment forward, I take responsibility. Maybe you can't control everything, but you can always control something. And that something, when owned, can transform everything. Imagine your life 1 year from now if you started today. Imagine your health stronger, your finances cleaner, your relationships deeper, your growth sharper. Imagine the freedom, the confidence, the pride of knowing you built it, not by chance, not by luck, not by waiting, but by owning. That's not a fantasy. That's the real reward of responsibility. So here's the final reminder. What you don't own, you can't improve. And what you don't improve, you will eventually regret. Don't let regret be your story. Let responsibility be your story. Own it. Improve it. Live it. Because the power has been in your hands all along. Start owning today.